What amazing things could God bring about if revival were to come to your town? Let's find out today in FIRESTARTERS 5. Hi, my name is Walton. This is FIRESTARTERS 5, Volume 71, for the week of September 5th through September 11th, 2021. The theme verse for this week comes from Isaiah 57, verse 15, that says, "Thus says the high and lofty one who inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy places. I also dwell with him who is contrite in spirit and lowly, to restore the spirit of the humble and to revive the heart of the contrite." The revival story for this week comes from the 1971 Saskatoon Revival, and this is part 2 of that story. It was October 13th, 1971, that the evangelists Ralph and Lou Sutera gave the first of many messages for their 10-day spiritual campaign at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Saskatoon, Canada. It was no ordinary day, for God over many years had heard the persevering prayers of His people crying out in extraordinary supplication for an outbreak of revival. And that evening, with just 150 people in attendance, the brothers shared the gospel of Jesus Christ, and they saw 5 people put their trust in the Lord. But far more than that, the presence of God began to flow through that place and through people's hearts with the force of revival fire. Over the course of that first week, the Spirit of God began to impress upon those in attendance the stark need to confess their sins and to make things right with Him. The Holy Spirit alighted upon the people to touch them with His grace, to break their bonds of slavery to self, and to set them free. Men and women would take to the stage to admit their own weaknesses and failings and to seek to do what was right. There are stories about estranged brothers who put aside their long-standing injuries. They made amends right there, and they joined together to worship Christ in song. There's another story of a family with a long-standing grudge against an adversary. And that family drove over 30 miles to another town, even though it was well after midnight, to ask that person, that adversary, for forgiveness. These kind of things don't just happen randomly or just because it's at the whim of a human person. It's because God is at work. The reality of God's very presence started to draw more and more people to the meetings. By the end of the first week, the sanctuary was, where they were meeting was so filled to capacity they couldn't stay there any longer. Within 2 weeks, they were allowed to meet at the 600-person capacity Anglican church nearby. But that space was outgrown in just 2 days. God gave us so much favor. And eventually, He gave a favor also with the biggest church in town, which was a Christian and Missionary Alliance church. So they moved once again to that facility, because that facility could hold over 1,000 people at a time. Yet, once again, guess what happened? The Spirit of God was moving so powerfully that it quickly reached the attendance limits at that church. They eventually had to move into a much larger venue that could hold about, I think it was about 2,000 people. And still, the people continued to come, keenly, spiritually hungry, seeking to meet with God in that place. Now, all during this time, there was great excitement surrounding what God was doing. However, it is noted that no excessive emotionalism was taking place. What there was strong conviction of sin and a determined desire to seek forgiveness, to grant forgiveness. There was a move for reconciliation and a seeking of healing. The gospel would be presented simply each night, and many folks surrendered to the Holy Spirit and were saved. What was the most distinguishing mark of this revival? The mark of this revival was a contagious joy of being in the Lord's presence. And this joy was a very practical joy because it ushered in a complete honesty before God and men. And therefore people would they would come clean about the things going on in their lives, because not because they felt shame or guilt, but because they just knew how good it was to be in God's presence. And people would simply come clean with what was going on. The stories are of like the police chief in Saskatoon. He testified that people were showing up at the police station during those times to confess to the crimes they had committed, just of their own volition. And it's been noted that almost half of those who were attending were young folks, and the Lord would meet with these young people and set them free from drugs, from alcohol, and all kinds of addictions. And it's noted that even those who had mental illnesses, these people found themselves profoundly touched and healed by the hand of God. As the meetings would wrap up each evening, typically no one wanted to go home. No one would be in a hurry. Many churches would open up afterwards and allow people to come in and share their stories, to give thanks to God for His work upon their hearts and lives. And intercessors would gather in small groups to keep on praying fervently after each meeting all through this time. And as all this was happening, churches all around the region started seeing revival fire burst to life among their people. Although the revival meetings in Saskatoon only lasted 7 weeks in total, these flames of revival would spread to distant cities in Canada, in the United States, and to nations all around the globe. It left an unmistakable mark upon the soul of Canada and even beyond. To this very day, many pastors in Canada can say, "I was saved at the revival in Saskatoon." It was such an amazing and profound revival, and so many great things happened. And what God did in that day, He can do again. Lord, do it again. I want to thank you for taking time to listen to the revival story this week. If you'd like to find out more information, find out more resources, please go to www.thinkrevival.com. You can go to our go to our website, thinkrevival.com, and you can also download our weekly prayer guide, which is called FIRESTARTERS 5, which has all this information and stories that you can read in about 5 minutes, or a little bit more maybe, and then you can pray for the needs of your city. And so like this week we have a number of things, praying against the Delta variant, praying for relief from in the aftermath of Hurricane Ida. We have a continued prayer for millennials, praying for a Love Life ministry, praying for Afghanistan, and of course we'll always end this prayer guide with a prayer for revival. And let me just read it this week. It says, "Pray that God would increase our belief in His ability to intervene supernaturally and do the impossible in our city. Pray for a desire to pray diligently and to regularly fast as we seek the very face of God." Thanks everyone for joining me this week. May you be blessed, and may your heart just continue to be stimulated and set on fire to want revival. Keep praying. Thank you so much.